Hi again, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed listening to The Legend of Spookley the Square Pumpkin. I'm going to talk to you now about readers. Now, Mrs. Fawcett just read this story to you, and readers have two jobs. And while I was reading, not only was I trying to figure out the words, I was also thinking about what the words meant. So the first job of a reader is to figure out the words and what word the letters are trying to be. And then the second job was for me to think about the words that I was reading. Today I want to talk to you about a strategy, and I'm going to model it for you, that readers do when they finish reading a book to help them think about what they just read. The strategy is a plan, and Mrs. Fawcett thinks it's very important that all of you understand that you have things you can do to help you become a stronger reader, and retelling is one thing you can do for yourself to help you become a stronger reader. When I say retell, that means that I need to think about, so after I finish The Legend of Spookley, I need to think about who the characters are in my story. The characters are the people that the story, or animals, or in our case, pumpkins, that the story is mainly about. And then I need to think about where the story takes place, and that's called the setting. I'm sure you've heard that word before. The setting is the place or time that the story happened. And then it's important at this point for you to remember that you need to retell yourself the events. And not only do you need to tell yourself what happened in the story, you need to tell yourself what happened in the story in the order it happened. One day in my classroom, I started reading a book to my kids, and I just picked the book up and I started reading in the middle. And they were like, "What are you doing, Mrs. Fawcett? You can't read a story starting in the middle. You have to start at the beginning, because if you don't start at the beginning, we don't know what's happened." And I was like, "You guys are brilliant. You're exactly right. Stories have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end. So when you finish reading a story, something you can do to help you think about what you just read is to tell yourself who the characters are, what the setting is, and tell yourself what happened in the story and the order that it happened in. So I'm going to model that for you with The Legend of Spookley that you just listened to. And I might ask you some questions as I'm modeling this. So first of all, I need to think about the characters. Now, in my story that I read to you, the main character is Spookley. His name is in the title, right? So we know that he's the main character of this story. And the story was mainly about him and the things that happened to him. We had some other characters in the book. I know the farmer is a character. Can you think of any other characters? Yes, the other round pumpkins would be characters. And so now I need to think about, where did this story take place? And I know first graders, and I know right now you're thinking, outside. This story took place outside. And you're right, this story did take place outside, but where outside? And what time outside? So let me think. When the story started, they were outside, and I think they were at like a pumpkin farm or a pumpkin patch, and it looked like it was daytime, right? And the weather was nice at the beginning of the story. I do remember that. And I think that the story also had a part that took place at night, because at the end of the story, I remember the farmer came and checked on his crop in the morning. So I think that the timing of the story was an overnight timing, and I think it took place outside in a pumpkin patch. So do you see what I'm doing? I'm retelling myself the story, and I just thought about the characters and the setting. Now, I want to talk about the things that happened in the story, and I'm not going to tell them out of order, because then my story won't make sense. So I want to think about the very beginning of the story. In fact, I might look back at the book. I happen to have it right here, and I can remind myself what happened at the beginning of the story. And guess what? You can do this too. We're not hiding answers from anybody. You can find them. They're right there. Oh, I remember this page. Do you guys remember this page? Look, Spookley looks really sad, doesn't he? I think the other pumpkins made fun of him, and I think he was sad because he was square. He wasn't like all the other pumpkins, and I think that's something important to remember from the beginning of the story. Oh, do you guys remember this? Remember? In the middle of the story when the rain came? Oh, yes. And then this is a really important event from the middle of the story. Those 3 pumpkins ended up out in the bay. We just looked at that picture. They ended up out in the bay. And then Spookley looked and saw what happened. And what did he do? He made himself flip-flop over until he blocked the gap in the fence. A gap is the opening in the fence where the pumpkins had broken through. And so because of the shape that Spookley was, he fit in the gap and he stayed right there. And then remember, all the other pumpkins rolled down and there was a great big pile of pumpkins on top of him. And Spookley saved the day. So a really important event in the middle of our story is that Spookley saved the day by putting actually himself kind of in danger because all those other pumpkins were piled on top of him. Okay, so that's the middle of the story. I'm thinking that in the middle of the story, Spookley saved the day by putting himself in the opening in the fence. Remember? Okay, and so then let me think about what happened. Okay, so then I know the next morning the farmer came and he checked on his crop and he moved all those pumpkins, and at the bottom of the pile he found Spookley. Do you remember that? And the author told me that that was the most important seed he'd sown. And so he decided that he was going to take the seeds from Spookley and use them to plant the crop for next year. I think that's really important because then at the end of the story, the next year's crop, all the pumpkins were square. They were also different colors, which was kind of cool. And we learned as readers that you really can't take the way somebody looks, or in this case a pumpkin looks, and decide who they are, how important they are, just judging them on their outside, which I love that story. And do you see how retelling the story to myself helped me understand and think about what I read? And you can do that too. So when you read, you need to, and you don't have to finish the book before you start. You can think along the way, okay, what's happened so far? Okay, in the beginning this happened, and now I'm in the middle, and this is happening. You have to be a thinker all the time. Okay, so guess what? Now you get to take my thinking and show me about Spookley the Square Pumpkin. On the first side of your page that's in your packet, there's a spot for you to draw and write about the characters. There's a spot for you to draw and write about the setting. If you can't remember what the setting and the characters are or were, you can go back and listen again to the story and figure it out. And then on the back of your paper, there's a spot for you to retell. And you can retell one important thing from the beginning, one important thing from the middle, and one important thing from the end. Yes, you can draw. Yes, you can write. Yes, you can do both. I would love for you to do both. Don't start stressing out about not knowing how to spell something. Pull the word apart and write down the sounds that you hear, and it will be fine. Use your ear spelling. Okay, I hope you have a good time working on your Spookley paper, and I can't wait to see you again on Monday.